Kako. I am humbled and honored to stand before you today to share why I love creating documentary films about hula and Hawaiian culture. Here I am on one of my all-time favorite days of shooting. But my journey to the edge of this crater at Hale Ma'uma'u was not, and never has been, a typical one. As a young college student in film school at New York University, I wasn't exactly sure what kind of a storyteller I wanted to be just yet. And to be totally honest, I wasn't interested in making documentary films. Having been raised on big Hollywood blockbusters, I knew that I wanted to entertain people through the magic of movie making. But at the same time, I also did not think that my own stories were Hollywood material. With a great passion for all kinds of storytelling, I decided I was going to produce films for other people. I worked on everything from kung fu films to horror flicks to World War II dramas set in Amsterdam, even a film about civil war and gang violence in El Salvador. Finally, one of my professors pulled me aside and she said, "Lisette, when are you going to tell your own stories?" Talk about being put on the spot. That one simple question made me ask a bunch of questions like, who am I? Where am I from? Why am I here? And what on earth do I have to say? Sitting in my teacher's office that day, I remember very inarticulately telling her that I had always dreamed of doing a film about Hawaii. Now, I was born and raised on the mainland, and I spent childhood summers here as a kid. And I think that I've always felt a very strong sense of connection and home tied to this place where my mother and her family are from. Because I moved around a lot, actually incessantly when I was a kid, and for those of you in the audience who are thinking, oh, military family, that was not the case. My father simply had itchy feet and was always in pursuit of a better life, a better job to support our family. I was born in Alaska. My brother was born in Utah. We moved from Northern California all over Southern California, Oregon, Virginia. By the time I had graduated from high school, I lived in more than 18 addresses. You can imagine how much I dreaded someone asking me where I was from. But I really believe that this perspective helped to inform me, and always kind of feeling like I was on the outside looking in, really taught me that I wanted to begin to tell stories from the inside out. Sitting in my teacher's office that day and sharing my story with her, as I do with all of you now, was really just the first step, the very beginning of my journey as a filmmaker. I remember when I told her I wanted to do a movie that showed what Hawaii is really like. She laughed and responded, and I vividly remember this, and she said, "That's a great idea, because nobody knows shit about Hawaii." My passion for telling stories about the hula dance really began with these iconic images of hula from old Hollywood movies, the coconut bra and the grass skirt. And actually, I threw in the hula hoop in there as well, because I can't tell you how many times when I was living in New York, I would say to someone, "I'm headed to hula class," and they would say, "But where's your hoop?" Instead of letting my anger or temper get the better of me when confronted with these silly questions about hula and Hawaii, or better yet, the wild flapping of the hands or the gyrating hip surges that people just love to do the minute you say the word hula, I decided that it might just be easier to make a film to explain away these stereotypes.
Welcome to the United States of America, which doesn't mean we're on a Hollywood film set.
In traditional times, hula was done by people who spent years and years of diligent work to make this dance the rich cultural tradition that it was. They weren't just these simple-minded dances of Hollywood starlets dancing in the grass skirts who knew nothing of what they were dancing. And what's so unfortunate about this is what most people think that hula is, what they see.
My first film took 5 years to make, and that actually is kind of a low average for documentary films. You'd be surprised. And it took that long mainly because I had no idea what I was doing, and funding for independence is hard to come by. But one thing that made me persevere was I was very passionate about sharing these stories from the Hawaiian diaspora and making sure that people who were Hawaiian but living on the mainland knew that their stories were important stories too. I was extremely interested in learning about how the hula connected these communities living in California to their culture and heritage.
I do everything with hula, I like to say. We do very traditional things, and then we do very contemporary things. And hula in Hawaii is that's like the last bastion of tradition. You know, you don't touch hula. If I was living in Hawaii, I would be having people looking over my shoulder all the time.
I know I've been wanting to move back home for years, but I can't because I have a responsibility here.
Do it for all the generations that came before and all the generations that's going to come after us. Now that looks better.
I think back home, you know, there's much more support. Being here on the mainland, we have to try a little bit harder.
And my halau is here in the OAK in Oakland, from the dark side of California. Oakland town, where I belong. Sometimes I think people back home look down on us thinking that we're not there, and they're mistaken. I'm not second-rate Hawaiian. For me, hula is war, and it's competitive, and I want to be the best.
I'm not into competing. I would much rather put on a big show. That way I can do whatever I want.
Every time I close my eyes.
Traditionalists are always complaining that a lot of hula today looks very modern, you know, it's not grounded in traditionalism. If you were to shut the music off, you could easily think that you're watching a traditional hula.
American Aloha, Hula Beyond Hawai'i received a national broadcast on PBS in 2003 and was one of the highest rated shows of the POV series that year. Actually, someone at PBS, I kind of remember them saying, it's the little hula film that could. But what was the reaction to this film here in Hawaii? In my opinion, I felt that the reaction to the film was, at times, lukewarm, and at its worst, cold. I remember people saying to me, well, they're pretty good for mainland halau. Or one person even asked me, when are you going to make a movie about real hula? Audiences around the country, however, responded with great interest at seeing glimpses of Hawaiian culture that were beyond the stereotypes that they were used to seeing on screen. And the number one question that I got in Q&As all around film festivals in the country was, wait a minute, do men dance hula? How did that happen? I thought that that was only for women. Much like the coconut bras and the grass skirts of old Hollywood films, I decided that it might be a good idea to make a film that focused just on our proud tradition of men dancing hula. And what better subject than musical legend and revered kumuhula, Robert Uluvehi Kazumero, and the only all-male hula school in Hawaii, who are all very good looking, according to Maka.
Moving your hips so much. Isn't that supposed to be a feminine thing to move the hips? We bought into being brainwashed that that's just not what men are supposed to do. My hula life would be nothing without my kumu, my teacher, my Kiayu Lake. She wanted me to have a halau only men, no women in it, just men.
Reggie, you should have looked at Kaulana, and you should have moved right in front of him. If he's over there, you got to get outside because he cannot follow you if you don't. Kapena, I'm ready to throw you out of this number, goddammit. I need you in your lines facing that way.
I don't know that it's words of encouragement as much as it is that final opportunity to connect with each dancer and to connect the dancers. Friday is the kahiko competition. Kahiko being the ancient music and dancing. I think I have the oldest dancers, and I definitely think I have the longest staying dancers with me.
Now, Kamalei, the Men of Hula, was a real crowd pleaser, and it had a Hollywood ending to boot. It was warmly received by audiences both in Hawaii and across the country when it aired on PBS. But for me, the real highlight was this screening, the Sunset on the Beach screening at the Hawaii International Film Festival. We had hula, Hawaiian music as the sun went down. And for me, what was truly magical about that evening was to see the entire community come out to support the film. Through all of my film work, I've been interested in exploring how Hawaiian culture is a living culture, not some relic of the past, but something that continues to grow and evolve in the modern world. And because the hula is so intimately tied to the language, I really wanted to make a film that celebrated the revival of the Hawaiian language itself. One Voice tells the story of the Kamehameha School Song Contest, a nearly 100-year-old tradition here in Hawaii that very few are aware of outside of the islands. Told through the eyes of the young high school students at Kamehameha, One Voice aired, was theatrically released here in Hawaii and also in Japan. Oftentimes, people have actually called this film a political film disguised as glee.
Aloha Hawai'i kuone hanau. Mai Hawai'i kuauli ake one oni hau.
Back in the day when the Hawaiians weren't allowed to speak Hawaiian, they'd have like these songs or these chants written in the newspaper, and that's how they would communicate to other people like what's going on.
Song contest is an appreciation of our language and appreciating the 30 years of it being an official language because it was banned.
I like Hawaiian music because it actually has a melody. It has musical qualities. Like, you know how they have a band geek? I'd be a song contest geek.
It
was like a must for me to come here. How can I tell the girls what to sing if I don't even know what they're singing about?
The place where I used to live is low-income housing, and I wouldn't go home. I would sleep over at a friend's house, because the house wasn't so safe.
The parents, I asked them, just let me take your kids. Don't let your kids suffer because what you guys do.
Look at Brolin now. I mean, look where he's at. He's a song conductor. First kawewehi.
I think it's kind of just a quiet, silent understanding between us that, we're going to do our best this year.
I really have to thank Na'alehu, actually. For those of you who have seen One Voice, he actually got a lot of those great cutaways of students on cell phones in song contest rehearsals. So mahalo, Lehu. As a filmmaker and a hula dancer, I am dedicated to sharing stories from a Hawaiian perspective on screen. And the one thing that hula dancers and filmmakers actually share in common is that both are storytellers. Oftentimes I've felt that as a filmmaker and a storyteller, I kind of have to walk a tightrope between two worlds. One in the Western world where stereotypes and misconceptions dominate the media, and also within the Native Hawaiian community, whom I feel a strong sense of kuleana or responsibility to make sure that I get these stories right, because there are far too few representations of Hawaiians on screen to begin with. Sorry, this clicker is really big. I really believe that documentary film gave me the courage to begin to tell my own stories. As I embark on finishing the Hula trilogy with Tokyo Hula, a documentary about the explosive popularity of hula in Japan, where it's now estimated that nearly 600,000 people are dancing hula today, I really feel that I've grown as a filmmaker and continue to grow. And now, as a professor here at the Academy for Creative Media at the University of Hawaii, it is my turn to ask my students, when are you going to tell your own stories? Whether it's the next generation of filmmakers at ACM, or the kupuna, or our elders who were brave enough to challenge themselves to learn filmmaking through the Kupuna Lens film program. It is my turn to inspire others to share their stories on screen, as one teacher once encouraged me to do. Mahalo, thank you so much.